Why aren't you eating dinner? My father-in-law asked, who we were seeing for the first time in a long time for New Year's. He must have noticed that there was only enough food at the dining room table for 3. It happens all the time. What? My father-in-law looked curiously across the table at my mother-in-law and husband. What exactly do you mean by it happens all the time? A daughter-in-law who can't give her mother-in-law grandchildren would have to be a slave, wouldn't she? While chewing on the hamburger steak I had made, my mother-in-law responded as if it were second nature. That's right, Ruby is our slave. She stays in the kitchen to take care of us while we eat. My husband sipped his beer loudly and said this in the same tone as his mother, as expected. He took me to his mother's every weekend to help her with housework. Even though you couldn't give her grandchildren, I'm letting you stay here. You should appreciate her and do the best you can for my mom. I didn't want to go to my in-laws' house, but I had made a commitment. Even if I refused to go, my husband would verbally force me. He knows I have a short temper and difficulty finding my words. Mom, I brought a slave. He even greeted me that way recently. What are you talking about? My father-in-law seemed offended by the way my mother-in-law and husband referred to me as a slave. That's a normal family with children. Ruby's infertility took the possibility of grandchildren away from me. Ruby, it's not your fault. You should stop bullying her. What do you mean? You're the one that lives so far away, so stay out of the problem. That's right, Dad. Don't tell me what to do. You didn't have to watch Mom lose the possibility of having grandchildren. In rebuttal, my mother-in-law and my husband sounded like they were mocking my father-in-law. I tossed the coffee beans in the grinder while listening to their conversation. My mother-in-law and husband always ordered me to bring them coffee as soon as they finished eating. I was so busy with shopping for my mother-in-law that I only had time to eat a piece of sweetbread earlier. Come on, I'm hungry too. I'm not sure what I'm doing. As if escaping from the grinder's blade, a single coffee bean fell to the floor. My name is Ruby, and I'm a 37-year-old housewife. During the weekday lunch hours, I work part-time in the kitchen of a family restaurant. My husband and I rent an apartment. I used to work at the same local bank as my husband, but I left 3 years ago. I quit to focus on fertility treatment. We were unable to have children, so we sought medical attention and were told that the problem was on my side. After a year of treatment, I was told that it is impossible for me to get pregnant. My mother-in-law and husband changed shortly after that. Originally, we were both working and managing our own income and budgets. When I quit my job, my husband was responsible for my living expenses. He took over our savings and the bills for rent and insurance, and he started giving me money for living expenses. At first, we were able to live comfortably on $1,000 a month. However, since we don't have fertility treatments anymore, you can save money. These were the first words out of my husband's mouth when we decided to give up on trying to conceive. What? Because of the financial burden of the treatment, I've been giving you more money for living expenses, but you don't need it anymore. You can go back to work if you want. True to his word, he cut back and gave me $800, then $600, even $500 a month. Of course, there was a time when I was desperately trying to find work. My mother-in-law, of all people, got in the way of that. Working as a full-time employee is not good for a wife. She will tell you that if you don't share the housework, she will divorce you. So you're saying I shouldn't work? Of course, if it's only part-time, then fine. You need to devote yourself to Carl and serve me. You can't even have grandchildren, so it's the least you can do. Is it really so bad that I can't have children? Despite going through painful treatments, I was unable to have a child. My mother-in-law, on the other hand, changed her mind about me. My bathroom is filthy, so please come and clean it. Drive me because I'm going out to dinner with a friend. She frequently called and asked me to run errands. To top it all off, I work every weekend at my in-laws' house. Plus, no matter what I did, all she did was complain. Why are you folding laundry like that? Why not put the corners together and fold it correctly and neatly? Do it again. My mother-in-law once threw the folded laundry onto the floor. She seemed to enjoy hurting me. I'm going out for a drink. Do you want to join me? My father-in-law asked after dinner. If you don't want to, you don't need to. I was just thinking about what happened during dinner. You've been treated so badly by Elizabeth and Carl. His words pulled on my heart. I automatically started to cry. I saw that, and if you want, you can vent to me. My father-in-law took me to a local bar. It was small, but clean and cozy. We sat at a table across from each other. He ordered a beer, and I ordered a whiskey soda. We ordered mixed nuts and a salad. At the dinner table, I could tell Elizabeth and Carl were being rude to you. My father-in-law began to speak after taking a sip of beer. I've been treated badly since I gave up fertility treatment. My father-in-law listened to me tell him about how his wife and son have treated me. I'm blamed for not being able to have children and am forced to run errands. I told him my husband wouldn't let me work full-time. He's reduced my living expenses after stopping fertility treatments, and now he only gives me $500 a month. What I hate most is being called a slave. Elizabeth is not happy unless she gets her way. Yeah, I know. She wasn't like this before, but she became selfish after having Carl. She would yell at me so much that I began to dislike her, and now we pretend to be a happy couple. Do you think it's because he doesn't want to be with me? I'm jealous my father-in-law has a place to escape to. You're not tough enough to make yourself heard. Yeah, but venting to you makes me feel better. Good, that makes me happy. Before leaving the restaurant, my father-in-law and I had one more beer and one more whiskey soda. However, a situation came up right after that. I'm back. My mother-in-law and husband were standing there when I opened the door. Dad, did you have a night out with my wife? My husband says this while looking at both of us. What? I just invited Ruby for a drink. What kind of relationship is this that you can go out for drinks together? My mother-in-law looked mad. What kind of, just like your husband said. What are you thinking, Ruby? Isn't it wrong for a wife to go to a bar with a man? You can't give me grandchildren, but you still have desires. My husband and mother-in-law both pointed at me. Enough! A powerful voice echoed throughout the area as if thunder had struck. My father-in-law was enraged, staring at Carl and Elizabeth. He blew up. What is it with you? Desire? All I wanted was for Ruby to relax. The rage sped up my heart rate. Mild-mannered people can become more difficult to deal with when angered. Elizabeth. When she heard her name called, my mother-in-law shuddered. She must be scared of him. Or maybe she had something to hide. You said, what kind of relationship do you have with your father-in-law that you go out drinking together? That's, my daughter-in-law is treated like a slave, and I took her to get her mind off it. That's what happened. Because of Ruby, I can't have grandchildren. How can you say that when you hate children? What? Those words made me want to yell. My mother-in-law always blamed me for not giving her grandkids. Well, grandchildren are different than other children, aren't they? That said, I don't think you wanted grandchildren enough to treat Ruby like this. You're just making an excuse to point the finger at her. My mother-in-law looked like she was about to say something to my father-in-law, but quickly averted her gaze. Did she have nothing to say back? Or was she afraid of her husband? Carl. Wait, what? I heard you only give Ruby $500 a month for living expenses. Do you keep the rest of your salary? No, I pay rent and insurance. Even so, I don't think that's all of your salary. My husband turned his head and bit his lower lip. He couldn't think of a quick excuse. I came here to discuss our future. Let's get right to it. My father-in-law led us to the living room. What do you mean, discuss our future? Just sit down. Make some coffee first, Ruby. Don't tell her what to do. My father-in-law yelled, and my mother-in-law shuddered again. Make coffee for us, and a cup for Ruby, too. My mother-in-law nodded and sat meekly in her chair. My husband took a seat beside her. I sat on a chair further away from the table. I'll be retired in a few years. After my current assignment ends, I won't be living with you anymore. My father-in-law, still standing, started to speak. What? What exactly do you mean? Elizabeth and Carl's voices overlapped. Mr. Murphy looked at both of them. We've been masquerading as a couple for years, so we no longer need to live together. I'll live where I want, and you can stay here. That's fine, but I changed my mind after you accused me of being unfaithful earlier. I'm selling the house. Elizabeth, I'll leave you. No, where am I gonna live? My mother-in-law, as expected, was surprised and stood up. Why don't you just get a place to live? How am I gonna do that? I can't pay the rent. Get Carl to help you. He only gives her $500 a month. I'm sure he can pay for you. That's not possible. When asked to handle things financially, Carl stood up and waved his hands. He must have been nervous because he was wobbling. We don't have any money. If I do that, I won't be able to pay Mom's debt. Elizabeth gasped. My husband swallowed his words. But I for sure heard that Elizabeth has debt. Was she in debt? You just mentioned debt, didn't you? My father-in-law exclaimed, even more horrified. Elizabeth and Carl, what exactly do you mean by debt? Explain. I didn't mean what I said. I said explain. My mother-in-law burst into tears when she heard her husband's angry voice. But his rage didn't fade. Mom owes me $50,000. I'm her co-signer. With a resigned expression on his face, my husband began to speak. Around the time we stopped fertility treatment, Mom made an investment. She made some money at first, but the stock market crashed. You mean you lost money in the stock market and went into debt? I used family funds. At the time, we were put onto stocks that would go up, but eventually we got into debt. But now I'm paying it with my salary, and Mom is repaying it by working part-time at a supermarket. This was news to me. I had never heard anything about any stocks or debt. My mother-in-law had lost a lot of money in the stock market and had borrowed money to make up for it when I stopped fertility treatment. She must have tried to pay back the debt by buying stocks that were supposed to go up. But as they were both repaying debt, that stock didn't go up either. Maybe, I couldn't help but say the first thing that popped into my mind. That's also when you and Carl began treating me like a slave. Ruby, what are you trying to say? Were you just taking it out on me? The slave treatment started around the time I stopped fertility treatments. I doubt that it's because she wanted a grandchild so badly, but the simple answer is that she was taking it out on me because that was satisfying. My mother-in-law stayed silent as expected. And Carl used the money that he took out of my monthly expenses to pay off his debts. He can save money because there's no fertility treatment. He didn't give me less money for some strange unknown reason. He just needed the money to repay his mom's debt. You stupid idiot! Finally, my father-in-law blew up. Even if it's family money, it's money I worked for and saved. You put it in stocks without consulting me. To top it all off, you lost it. What the hell kind of money are you spending? After saying this, my father-in-law suddenly left the room as if he had thought of something. He looked like he was going to the second floor. We all followed him. What are you doing, Dad? Show me Elizabeth's stuff. I'll check what she's buying. Stop! She cried and screamed, but her husband didn't care. Stop it! Her husband opened the closet door as she yelled. The first thing that caught my eye was a luxury handbag. With just a quick glance, you could see at least 10 of them. Ruby, are these bags expensive? They're all luxury items, costing over $1,000. My father-in-law opened a small drawer in the corner of the closet. There was an array of accessories, rings, necklaces, and earrings. Some of them had diamonds, rubies, and other precious stones on them. I picked up the ring and looked at the inside. I found an engraving of K18, indicating it was made of 18-karat gold. Elizabeth, you bought all these expensive things without telling me? I'm sorry, but... Divorce! My father-in-law turned his eyes on my husband in disgust and he snapped. All this spending, investing in stocks without my permission, and treating Ruby like a slave? Divorce. I want a divorce. I won't take no for an answer. Then how am I supposed to live? Talk to Carl. I'll sell this house and land immediately. You can sell these bags and jewelry to pay for the move. My mother-in-law couldn't say anything back. My husband was nodding his head and biting his lip. He no longer had the arrogant and domineering demeanor that he had when he treated me like a slave, like it was a lie. The next day, my father-in-law got 2 sets of divorce papers. Here, Ruby, if you want to file for divorce too, my father-in-law said as he handed one to me. I looked at my husband, and he sighed and looked away from me. Of course I want a divorce, but more importantly, we want alimony from these people. I thought hard about this all night last night. How have I been suffering for so long? What do I want to do now? I really wanted to have a child. The fertility treatment was agonizing, but I endured it. But then I realized that I couldn't conceive. I continued my story, holding back the tears in my eyes. All the painful tests and treatments I went through to become a mother were all for nothing. I can't have a baby no matter how I try. As I was grieving, Carl told me that since I didn't need fertility treatment, he would reduce my living expenses. What? Are you saying this is all Carl's fault? Shut up, Elizabeth. My father-in-law was horrified, and my mother-in-law immediately stopped talking. My mother-in-law blamed me for not giving her a grandchild, and then she treated me like a slave. Do you know how hard it was for me? Naturally, there was no way Elizabeth or Carl would respond. But in the end, Carl just needed money to pay off his debts. For Elizabeth, it was just an outlet for the stress of losing so much money in the stock market. I want you to reimburse me for this. What if I say I won't pay? Sure, I'll talk to my lawyer. My husband put his palm to his forehead and fell silent. After the new year, my father-in-law officially divorced my mother-in-law. When he put his house on the market, he found a buyer within a few days. Someone was just looking for land to build a house in that area, so they decided to tear down the old house and clear the land before selling it. Having no place to stay, my mother-in-law moved into a rundown apartment that looked like it would cave in from a gentle breeze. She now lives with my ex-husband. In addition to their living costs, they have to pay off their debt and alimony to me, which I'm sure is very difficult for them financially. My mother-in-law is working at a supermarket during the day and a part-time job at a pub at night. My husband also works a second job on the weekends at a wedding hall in addition to his company job. They complain to everyone around them that it's hard to pay their debt and alimony while watching others become happy. Meanwhile, I moved into a beautiful little apartment and got a job through my father-in-law. It was a clerical job at a security company. He said I could use my knowledge of accounting and my skills from working at a bank. I want you to be happy. If you ever need help, just tell me anything. My father-in-law is on my side, and I will do my best in this new chapter to reassure him. And this time, I will shine on my own. The morning of my first day at work, I put on a new suit and made a promise to myself.
What on earth were you two doing, sneaking away in the middle of the funeral? Despite my angry shout, my son and his wife just smirked. We couldn't be at the funeral. We had to prepare for our move, you see. Move? Upon closer inspection, I noticed that the furniture in the house had been swapped with theirs. My belongings, which should have been in my room, were piled up haphazardly near the entrance. What's going on? Facing my astonished expression, my daughter-in-law Lisa said with a grin, Starting today, we'll be living in this house. It would be best if you, mother-in-law, went to a nursing home or something. Are you serious? Yes, of course we're serious. Please retire and make way for us, old lady. I was shocked that they would do such a thing on the day of the funeral, but I quickly composed myself and told Lisa with a smile, Fine then, do as you please. It seemed that my son and his wife had completely forgotten something important. My name is Susan. I turned 51 this year. My pride and joy is my son, William. William has been kind-hearted since he was a child. And he grew up to be a fine young man who cares for his parents. After graduating from college, William got a job in a company in New York City. But for the first few years, he was assigned to work in Nebraska. It was lonely to be apart from William, but for his growth, my husband and I saw him off with smiles. "Mom, are you and Dad doing well? No health problems?" At first, William, who had started living alone in a new place, called us frequently. "Yes, your father and I are both fine. How about you, William? Are you eating well? Is work not too busy?" "I'm all right. Well, I eat out a lot, but I think of your cooking and pay attention to my nutrition. I want to eat your home-cooked meals, but I'll do my best here until I get used to work." My husband and I were relieved to hear our son's enthusiasm for his new job. But after a few months, William stopped contacting us as often. He could at least tell us if he's coming home for the holidays. Even by the end of the year, he hadn't contacted us and didn't even reply to our emails. So I called William's cell phone in frustration. "Hello? Hello?" However, a woman with an unfamiliar voice answered the phone. This is William's cell phone, right?" "Yeah, but are you a friend of Liam's?" "Liam?" As I was puzzled by the woman who called my son Liam, I heard William's voice in the background. "Lisa, who are you talking to?" Then Lisa, called by that name, answers William, so that I can hear. "Some old lady called." "Old lady? Who's that?" William laughs and answers the phone. "Hello? Oh, Mom, what's up?" Instead of scolding the woman who insulted me, William coldly replies to me. Confused, I respond to William. "Well, I was worried because you never contacted us. Are you coming home for Christmas? And is the girl who answered the phone earlier your girlfriend?" "Piss off." What? William's response was a word I had never heard him use before.
"I said, you're pissing me off. Stop interfering in my life. It's so irritating."
William yells that and hangs up the phone. There was a time during his teenage years when he became cold, but I never imagined that he would suddenly become so rude after becoming an adult. I stood there, dumbfounded, with the phone in my hand. Seeing my expression, my husband worriedly asks,
"What's wrong? Did you talk to William?"
I told my husband about the rude woman who answered the phone, and that William had told me to piss off.
"Maybe it's her influence, or maybe it's just him growing up. Let's leave him be for now."
Taking my husband's advice, I restrained myself from contacting William. A year later, with almost no contact from William, he suddenly finished his rural assignment and called to say he was coming back to New York. As we waited for William at home, there was an unfamiliar woman standing beside our son, whom we hadn't seen before. "William, who is this?"
"This is Lisa. I'm marrying her."
"Marrying?" My husband and I were surprised by William's words and looked at the woman. But Lisa didn't greet us and just talked to William. "Is this your parents' house? It looks so old-fashioned and uncool." I suddenly realized, upon hearing her voice, Liam, Lisa, this is the woman who answered my phone call a year ago. When I gave my husband a pleading look, he immediately understood and asked Lisa seriously,
"Lisa, how long have you been dating our son?"
"Huh? I don't remember." "Are you the type who cares about how many years you've been dating, mister? That's hilarious for an old man." My husband, who had been polite to Lisa, was left with his mouth hanging open at her response. Instead of scolding Lisa for her words, William just laughed along with her.
"This isn't going to work out,"
my husband muttered, just loud enough for me to hear. I couldn't agree more. We were against our son's marriage, but he and Lisa had already registered their marriage without listening to our opinions. They rented an apartment nearby and started their new life together. You're already married? What about the wedding ceremony? I asked William, shocked by the news.
We don't really need a ceremony. Lisa thinks it's a waste of money,
he replied. Despite living in a pricey rental apartment, William and Lisa often came to our house for dinner, claiming they didn't have enough money. Although we were happy to see William, Lisa constantly criticized my cooking.
Mother-in-law, can't you make more fashionable dishes? This doesn't look good in photos at all.
I'm not making it for photos. If you have a problem, you don't have to eat it. Even though I told her this, Lisa didn't seem bothered. After a year, William started to become more like Lisa, and he would insult us every time he visited. One day, after William and Lisa arrived, I was about to go shopping. William looked down on me and said,
Mom, what do you think I called you for yesterday? You should have bought the ingredients beforehand. You're so inefficient.
Both my husband and I began to dread William and Lisa's visits. Amidst this, I received even worse news. My husband was diagnosed with cancer. The doctor told us he had only 6 months left to live. Surprisingly, William and Lisa visited my husband in the hospital, perhaps concerned about his condition. After some conversation, they quickly left the room. I hurried to catch up with them to express my gratitude, but I overheard their conversation in the hallway.
Your father is in a private room, huh? Isn't that expensive? What a waste of money.
Yeah, I thought the same thing. It's not like he's going to survive anyway, so the treatment costs are pointless.
It's stupid to spend money on someone who's going to die anyway.
True.
Hey, Liam, let's get your parents' house once your dad dies.
But my mom will still be there.
I wish your mother would just follow him quickly.
Yeah, it's just a matter of time with her.
William and Lisa were making fun of my husband's struggle with his illness and my care for him behind our backs. I noticed my emotions were getting out of control, and I felt like I would lose my composure if I met them in this state. So I returned to the hospital room where my husband was waiting to settle my feelings for a moment.
What's wrong? Were you able to express your gratitude to the two of them?
I relayed the conversation I had overheard in the hallway to my husband, who asked me the question. He had been listening quietly, but I could tell he was trembling with anger.
I can't believe they would say such things.
He seemed to make a decision and told me.
I have an idea.
The next day, my husband called William and Lisa into the hospital room.
What do you want? We already visited you yesterday.
William and Lisa appeared displeased to have their weekend interrupted.
I want to talk about the inheritance after my death.
At the mention of inheritance, Lisa's eyes lit up.
Liam is the only son, so the inheritance should be his, right? How much is it?
As Lisa eagerly leaned in to discuss the money, my husband calmly told her.
There are about $70,000 in assets in the bank. The life insurance beneficiary is Susan, so that will go to her. But I plan to leave all the bank assets to William.
William thought for a moment.
Well, I guess it can't be helped that the life insurance goes to Mom. $70,000, huh? I thought there would be more.
Then Lisa suddenly raised her voice.
What about the family home? It's in a great location, and the land is spacious, so it must be worth more than $100,000.
At Lisa's words, William also excitedly asked my husband.
That's right, Dad. What about the inheritance of the family home?
My husband spoke quietly.
I'm going to put the house in Susan's name. After all, she's the one living there.
Upon hearing this, William and Lisa strongly protested.
What? That's not fair. Mom's getting the life insurance too, isn't she? The life insurance will mostly be used for funeral expenses and other costs. Even so, I'm getting the short end of the stick if I only get $70,000 and Mom gets a house worth more than $100,000. That's why I'm saying I'll give all the money in the bank to you.
Lisa also argued back.
We don't need that petty cash. Forget about the bank money. Just leave the house to Liam.
My husband and I exchanged glances and nodded in agreement. Then my husband reluctantly told them,
Fine, I'll leave the house to William, and all the bank money will go to Susan. Is that okay? All right.
As William and Lisa celebrated with a triumphant pose, my husband continued.
However, as I mentioned earlier, your mother is currently living in that house. Even if the ownership is transferred to William after my death, I want Susan to be allowed to continue living there. Fine, fine.
In their excitement about obtaining the house, William and Lisa brushed off my husband's words. To make sure they understood, my husband reiterated,
The condition for William inheriting the family home is that Susan is allowed to live there while she's still healthy. William and Lisa, are you both okay with that?
William and Lisa answered reluctantly.
Yeah.
We get it.
Father-in-law is so persistent.
Hearing their words loud and clear, my husband told them.
All right, I'll make sure to include this in the will.
William and Lisa left the hospital room in high spirits, discussing how to spend the $100,000 they had just received, without even saying goodbye to us. A month later, my husband's condition took a sudden turn for the worse. The hospital did everything they could, but they couldn't stop the progression of the cancer, and my husband passed away. While I was busy organizing the funeral as the chief mourner, William and Lisa were visibly restless. Even during my eulogy, they whispered to each other and then quietly left the funeral home. They never returned after the funeral. When I got home, I noticed the lights were on. Feeling suspicious, I opened the door to find William and Lisa waiting inside. What were you two doing, leaving in the middle of the funeral? Ignoring my angry outburst, the couple just smirked.
We couldn't be at the funeral. We had to prepare for our move.
Move? Looking around, I noticed that the furniture in the house had been switched with William and Lisa's. My belongings, which should have been in the room, were piled up haphazardly near the entrance. What's going on? Grinning, Lisa told me.
From today on, we'll be living in this house. It'd be nice if you, mother-in-law, went to a nursing home or something.
Are you serious?
Yeah, we're totally serious. You old people should retire already.
Shocked that they would do such a thing on the day of the funeral, I quickly changed my attitude and smiled at Lisa. Fine. Go ahead, do as you please. William and Lisa were taken aback by my easy acceptance.
So, you're really going to a facility?
I'm healthy enough to live alone in this house, so I'm not going to a facility yet. For now, I'll just find a place to live until I settle down. Satisfied with my response, the couple sent me on my way. 1 month later, I received a call from Lisa.
Mother-in-law, a lawyer just called and said that the house isn't under Liam's name, but yours. What's going on?
Well, about that. I explained to Lisa about the conditional will. My husband told you both that the house would be under William's name as long as I was able to continue living there.
Now that you mention it, he did say something like that.
To make sure there was no confusion later on, my husband made sure to include that in his will. He should have told you in the hospital room.
But that doesn't mean we have to give it back.
Under a conditional will, if the conditions aren't met, you lose the right to inherit. The moment you kicked me out of the house, you lost the right to inherit it. While informing Lisa, I recalled the conversation I had with my husband in the hospital room. I was furious that they called my husband as good as dead. But my husband was also quite angry at the two of them making comments that seemed to wish for my early death. However, I had a faint hope that if I died and left William alone, he might revert back to his kinder self. If I could continue to live peacefully in our home, even after my husband's death, I was willing to let the ownership of the house go to our son, and so I held on to that glimmer of hope. I had also hoped that your hearts would change with my husband's death, which is why I agreed to his proposal. The conditional will was your last chance.
You mean you anticipated this might happen?
I didn't want it to, but you two kicked me out on the very day of the funeral. I never thought you'd treat your parents so carelessly, but thanks to that, I've made up my mind.
Made up your mind to do what?
To kick you two out of that house and cut ties with you. Lisa, in a fit of anger, retorted to my firm statement.
Well, we won't accept that. This house is ours. We're not going anywhere.
And she continued with a triumphant look.
Liam knows a lawyer, you know. We'll have them do something about it.
I knew it was too late for Lisa's struggles to change anything. I simply told her, "Do as you please," and hung up the phone. The next day, I was called to a cafe by William and Lisa. As soon as I arrived at the designated cafe, the two of them bowed their heads. "Mom, I'm sorry."
Mother-in-law, I apologize.
William, who had heard everything from Lisa, consulted with a lawyer he knew, and was told that the will was legally binding. He was also explained that since he had broken the conditions, he no longer had any ownership of the family home. Our lawyer friend told us that if we don't leave immediately, we could be sued for trespassing, and we wouldn't have a leg to stand on. So the two of them panicked and called me. With a solemn expression, William continued, "Mom, please, give up the inheritance." "What?" "We want you to give us the house." I was utterly disgusted with William and Lisa, who still only thought of their own interests, even after hearing everything. There's no way I'm agreeing to such a selfish request. "But we'll be in trouble without the house." "What's the problem? Just move out. We have debts." In a barely audible voice, William began to explain why the family home was absolutely necessary. After I left, Lisa immediately looked up the market value of the house. She discovered that the land was worth much more than they had thought. Lisa suggested to William that they should sell the house quickly while the price was high and get their hands on the cash. William agreed, and the two of them seemed to have been indulging in extravagance for the past month in celebration. Living it up like that. Where did you get the money? "I went into debt. I thought I could pay it back right away if I sold the house." Lisa half cries, pleading with me.
Mother-in-law, please. We can't pay back the debt unless we sell this house. Don't let our family suffer.
Don't let your family suffer. How can you say that?
I answered indignantly. You two were calling my husband, who was fighting his illness, a failed death, and wishing that I'd die soon, weren't you?
You heard that?
Why should I help people like you? This house holds memories with my husband. You two kicked me out of it. I will not allow you to sell my memories with my husband as long as I live. William desperately clings to me with a pitiful voice. Then give me the money from the bank. I'll use it to pay off the debt. Huh? Weren't you the ones who said you didn't want that dirty money? Don't you get that you don't have the right to take that cash anymore? Damn it. If Lisa hadn't said anything unnecessary, we'd have the cash by now. Lisa lashes out at Liam, who regrets his actions.
Excuse me, Liam? You were happy when you heard you'd get the house too. He's your father, so do something about it.
It's your fault, so you do something about it. I calmly told the two who started fighting. If you're going to have a marital fight, do it later. Just as Liam's lawyer friend said, I'll sue you for trespassing if you don't leave right away. Go back home and prepare to move. At the mention of suing, the two stopped arguing and hurried back to their house. They then packed their belongings and left in a rush. Afterward, the two searched for a new home, but with their debt, the only place they could rent was a rundown apartment that looked like it was about to collapse. because they borrowed as much money as they could without worrying about the interest, planning to pay it back quickly. Their debt just grew larger, even though they were working. It seemed like it would be a long time before they could fully pay it off. I returned to my own home after a month, with everything going as planned with my late husband. It was unexpected that my son and his wife tried to sell our home and ended up squandering money and going into debt, but everything else went according to plan. It might have been an expensive lesson for William and Lisa, but it was a good opportunity for them to reflect on their actions. Finally, living a peaceful life in this house filled with memories of my husband was the happiest thing for me. I'm sure my husband is watching over me from heaven.